Rain poured down the darkened streets as Jill hurried home, clutching her briefcase tight. The ominous howl of the wind sent shivers down her spine. Something wasn't right. As she rounded the corner, her heart sank. A massive pile of rotting garbage blocked the entrance to her driveway. What the? Jill's eyes darted around, searching for any sign of the culprit. The stench was overpowering. She inched closer, a growing sense of dread tightening her chest. Scrawled across the filthy heap in sloppy paint was a chilling message. Asterisk, asterisk, kesto p interfering, bitch, asterisk, asterisk. Jill's hands trembled as she fumbled for her phone, fingers dancing across the screen. Security, this is Jill Parker from 42 Maple. There's a huge pile of trash blocking my driveway and... A deep, gruff voice cut her off. We're aware of the situation, ma'am. Our patrol is on its way. Jill's heart raced. This was no random act of vandalism. The HOA was behind this, she was certain of it. Ever since she challenged their corrupt bylaws and brought a lawsuit against them, the retribution had been relentless. Now they were stooping to these kinds of tactics to intimidate her. Asterisk, not this time. The rain had stopped, but the air was thick with tension as Jill and Nathan waited for the police to arrive. Jill paced the living room, her mind racing. Asterisk, they're watching us. Waiting for us to make a move, asterisk. The doorbell rang and Jill's heart leaped. She took a deep breath, then opened the door to reveal two uniformed officers. Good evening, ma'am, the taller officer said, his gaze sweeping the foyer. We received a call about a disturbance. Jill nodded, her expression guarded. Yes, officers. Someone has dumped a massive pile of trash in front of my driveway and they've been leaving threatening messages. The officers exchanged a glance, then a shorter one spoke up. Can you show us the, evidence? Jill led them outside, her eyes narrowed. The heap of garbage still blocked the entrance, the ominous message glaring back at them. The taller officer knelt down, inspecting the scene. This is quite a mess. Do you have any idea who might have done this? Jill hesitated, then decided to be direct. It's the HOA. They're retaliating against me for filing a lawsuit against them. The officers looked at each other, their expressions unreadable. The HOA, huh? That's a serious allegation, the shorter one said. Jill felt a surge of frustration. Look, I know it sounds crazy, but they've been harassing you for months. This is just the latest in a long line of intimidation tactics. The taller officer stood, his brow furrowed. We'll need to investigate further before making any conclusions. In the meantime, we suggest you clean up this mess and avoid any confrontations. Jill opened her mouth to protest, but Nathan placed a hand on her arm, silencing her. We understand, officers. Thank you for your time. As the police drove away, Jill turned to Nathan, her eyes blazing. You can't be serious. They're just going to let this slide. Nathan sighed, his expression weary. Jill, you know how the HOA operates. They have their fingers in everything, including the local authorities. We can't expect the police to help us. Jill clenched her fists, frustration building. Then, what are we supposed to do? Just sit back and let them terrorize us. No, of course not, Nathan said, his gaze resolute. But we need to be strategic. We can't just charge in guns blazing. We need to play their game, use their own rules against them. Jill studied her husband's face, seeing the determination there. She nodded slowly, her mind already racing the possibilities. All right, fine, but we need to move fast. Who knows what they'll do next? Nathan placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Don't worry, we'll figure this out. Together. As they set to work clearing the trash, Jill couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. She scanned the empty streets, her eyes narrowing. Asterisk, they're out there waiting. But so am I, asterisk. Jill's resolve hardened. She would not be intimidated, not by the HOA or anyone else. This was her home, her life, and she was going to fight for it. Asterisk, watch your back, Karen, asterisk, she thought, a grim smile spreading across her face. Asterisk, because I'm coming for you, asterisk. The next morning, Jill sat at her kitchen table, her brow furrowed in concentration as she pored over a stack of documents. Nathan bustled around the room preparing breakfast, his eyes occasionally darting to his wife's determined expression. Any progress? He asked, setting a steaming mug of coffee before her. Jill sighed, running a hand through her hair. Maybe. I've been combing through the HOA's bylaws, looking for any loopholes or inconsistencies we can exploit. Nathan nodded, sliding into the chair across from her. That's a good start. What have you found? Well, for starters, the section on property maintenance is surprisingly vague. There's no clear definition of what constitutes acceptable lawn care or landscaping. Jill's eyes gleamed with a hint of mischief. I think we can use that to our advantage. Nathan leaned forward, his interest piqued. Go on. The bylaws also state that the HOA has the right to levy fines for any violations, but there's no mention of a specific appeals process. Jill's lips curved into a wry smile. Looks like they've left the door open for a little creative interpretation. Nathan chuckled, shaking his head. I can see the wheels turning in that brilliant mind of yours. What are you planning? Jill reached across the table, squeezing his hand. Something that's going to make that Karen in the HOA very, very unhappy. The sound of the doorbell interrupted their conversation, and Jill felt a familiar sense of dread. She exchanged a tense glance with Nathan before rising to answer the door. On the other side stood a middle-aged woman, her pristine white blouse and impeccably tailored skirt a stark contrast to the storm-battered neighborhood. Her lips were pursed in a disapproving frown, and her eyes narrowed as they landed on Jill. Mrs. Parker, I'm Karen Williamson, the HOA president. We need to have a little chat. Jill fought the urge to slam the door in the woman's face. Instead, she forced a polite smile and stepped aside. Of course, please come in. As Karen swept into the foyer, her gaze swept the room, pausing on the pile of documents strewn across the kitchen table. Her lips curled into a thin smile. I see you've been busy. Trying to find a way to wriggle out of your responsibilities, I presume? Jill clenched her jaw, her hands balling into fists at her sides. I'm simply ensuring that I'm in full compliance with the HOA's bylaws _Karen _. The older woman let out a derisive laugh. Oh, Jill, you really have no idea what you're up against, do you? She stepped closer, her eyes narrowing. This is my neighborhood, and I will not tolerate any challenges to my authority. Jill felt a chill run down her spine, but she refused to back down. Is that a threat? Karen's smile only widened. Consider it a friendly warning. I hate for anything _unfortunate to happen to your lovely home. With that, she turned on her heel and strode towards the door, pausing only to look back over her shoulder. Oh, and Jill, I'd be careful about letting your lawn get too overgrown. You wouldn't want to incur any penalties would you? The door slammed shut, leaving Jill and Nathan in stunned silence. Jill's hands trembled with a mix of fear and rage. That woman is pure evil, she whispered, her voice quivering. But she has no idea of who she's dealing with. Nathan wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close. We'll get through this, Jill. I promise. As Jill held her husband tight, she knew that the battle had only just begun. The HOA had brought the fight to her doorstep, and she was more determined than ever to win. Bring it on, Karen. She thought, her eyes hardening with resolve. This is war. The days that followed were a blur of tension and careful maneuvering for Jill and Nathan. They had to tread carefully, constantly on the lookout for any signs of the HOA's retaliation. Jill spent hours poring over the HOA's bylaws, searching for loopholes and legal technicalities she could exploit. Nathan, in turn, kept a vigilant eye on their property, ensuring that every blade of grass was perfectly manicured and every flower bed meticulously maintained. But the true battle was being waged in the shadows, where the HOA's influence ran deep. Jill knew that Karen and her cronies had eyes and ears everywhere, ready to pounce on any perceived transgression. One afternoon, as Jill was tending to her garden, a shadow fell over her. She glanced up to see Mrs. Jenkins, the nosy neighbor from down the street, her lips pursed in a disapproving frown. Jill, dear, I couldn't help but notice your lawn is looking a bit, unkempt the woman said, her tone dripping with condescension. Jill felt a surge of irritation, but she forced a polite smile. I'm afraid I'm a bit behind on the mowing, Mrs. Jenkins, but I assure you I'll have it taken care of soon. The older woman's eyes narrowed. Well, you know how particular the HOA can be about these things. I hate for you to incur any penalties . Jill's grip tightened on the gardening tools in her hands, her knuckles turning white. I appreciate your concern, Mrs. Jenkins. I'll be sure to take care of it. As the nosy neighbor turned and shuffled back to her own immaculate lawn, Jill felt a chill run down her spine. She knew that this was no innocent warning. It was a veiled threat, a message from the HOA that they were watching her every move. That evening, as Jill and Nathan sat at the kitchen table, discussing their next steps, the doorbell rang. Jill's heart raced, but she forced herself to remain calm as she opened the door. To her surprise, it was a young man in a crisp uniform, holding a clipboard. Good evening, ma'am. I'm here from the HOA to conduct a property inspection. Jill's brow furrowed. At this hour? Isn't that a bit unusual? The man shrugged, his expression neutral. Just following orders, ma'am. Now, if you don't mind, I'd like to take a look around. Jill reluctantly stepped aside, her gaze narrowed. As the inspector swept through the house, poking and prodding at every corner, she could feel the tension in the air. When he finally emerged from the basement, his expression was unreadable. Well, everything seems to be in order, but I'd be sure to stay on top of that lawn, if I were you. Wouldn't want any issues to arise. Jill felt a chill run down her spine. I'll keep that in mind. As the inspector departed, Jill closed the door, her mind racing. Nathan, they're not even trying to hide it anymore. This is pure intimidation. Her husband nodded grimly. I know, but we can't let them get to us. We need to stay focused and keep playing by the rules. Jill sighed, her shoulders slumping. I'm just so tired of this constant game of cat and mouse. When does it end? Nathan reached across the table, taking her hand in his. It ends when we win, Jill, and we will. I promise. Jill squeezed his hand, drawing strength from his unwavering support. All right then, let's get to work. As they pored over the Iowa's bylaws once more, Jill couldn't shake the feeling that the walls were closing in. But she refused to let fear paralyze her. She would fight, tooth and nail, to protect her home and her family. Asterisk, this is far from over, Karen. Asterisk, she thought, her eyes narrowing with determination. Asterisk, I'm just getting started. Asterisk. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity for Jill and Nathan as they meticulously executed their plan to take down the corrupt HOA. Jill's keen eye for detail and Nathan's technical expertise proved to be a formidable combination. First, they began systematically documenting every interaction with the HOA, recording conversations and taking detailed notes. Jill knew that a solid paper trail would be crucial in their eventual legal battle. Next, they turned their attention to the HOA's financial records, uncovering a web of questionable transactions and undisclosed fees. Jill's legal background came in handy as she pored over the Byzantine paperwork, looking for any signs of embezzlement or misappropriation of funds. Meanwhile, Nathan set to work on the technological front, hacking into the HOA's security cameras and monitoring system. He discovered a network of hidden surveillance cameras throughout the neighborhood, all funneling data directly to Karen's personal computer. This is how they're keeping tabs on everyone, Nathan said, his brow furrowed in concentration. They're watching our every move. Jill nodded, her expression grim. Then we'll need to play their game, but better. Can you find a way to disrupt their system? Nathan's lips curled into a mischievous grin. Oh, I think I can manage that. Over the next few days, Jill and Nathan carefully executed their plan, manipulating the HOA's own rules and regulations to their advantage. They deliberately allowed their lawn to become slightly overgrown, knowing that the HOA's zealous inspectors would descend upon them. Sure enough, the doorbell rang one afternoon, and Jill opened it to find a familiar face, Mrs. Jenkins, her lips pursed in a disapproving frown. Jill, dear, I'm afraid your lawn is in violation of the HOA's standards. You'll need to take care of this immediately, or you'll face a fine. Jill feigned an apologetic expression. Oh, I'm so sorry, Mrs. Jenkins. We've been so busy, and it must have slipped our minds. We'll get right on that. The older woman's eyes narrowed, and Jill could see the suspicion simmering behind them. See that you do. You know how the HOA feels about these things. As Mrs. Jenkins turned and headed back down the driveway, Jill couldn't help but smile. It was time to put the next phase of their plan into motion. That evening, as the sun began to set, Jill and Nathan went to work. Nathan hacked into the HOA's security system, looping the footage to create the illusion of a perfectly manicured lawn. Meanwhile, Jill carefully trimmed the overgrown patches, ensuring that everything was in pristine order. The next morning, the doorbell rang again, and Jill opened it to find a scowling HOA inspector. Mrs. Parker, I'm here to follow up on the lawn violation. I'm afraid I'll have to issue a... The man's words trailed off as he stepped onto the property, his eyes widening in disbelief. But it's perfect. Jill schooled her features into an expression of innocent confusion. Is there a problem, officer? The inspector's brow furrowed, his gaze darting around the flawless lawn. No problem. Everything seems to be in order. He turned and headed back to his vehicle, muttering under his breath. Jill closed the door, a triumphant grin spreading across her face. That's 1 point for us, Karen. As the days passed, Jill and Nathan continued their game of cat and mouse with the HOA, always staying one step ahead. They used the organization's own rules and regulations against it, exploiting loopholes and technicalities to avoid fines and sanctions. But Jill knew that the real battle was far from over. Karen and her cronies were not the type to simply admit defeat. She could feel the tension building like a storm on the horizon. Asterisk, this is just the calm before the storm. Asterisk, Jill thought, her eyes narrowing with determination. Asterisk, and I'm ready for it. Asterisk. The atmosphere in the neighborhood grew increasingly tense as Jill and Nathan's battle with the HOA escalated. Neighbors who had once been friendly now eyed each other with suspicion, afraid to step out of line and incur the wrath of the powerful homeowners association. Jill could feel the weight of their scrutiny every time she stepped outside, the whispers and sidelong glances following her every move. It was a constant reminder that the HOA had eyes and ears everywhere, and that they were not to be underestimated. Despite their relentless pressure, Jill and Nathan continued to play their carefully crafted game, using the HOA's own rules against them at every turn. They meticulously documented every interaction, every violation, and every attempt at intimidation, knowing that they would need an ironclad case when the time came to take their fight to the courts. But the true test came one evening when Jill received a call that chilled her to the bone. "Mrs. Parker, this is the police. I'm afraid we have a situation at your home." Jill's heart raced as she listened to the officer's words, her mind racing with 1,000 scenarios. Had the HOA finally made good on their threats? Had they orchestrated some sort of false accusation? "What's happened?" she asked, her voice trembling. "It appears your home has been vandalized. We've received reports of broken windows and graffiti on the walls." Jill felt the blood drain from her face. "I'll be right there." As she rushed home, Nathan by her side, her mind was a whirlwind of emotions. Anger, fear, and a deep sense of betrayal all vied for dominance, but beneath it all, a steely determination took hold. Asterisk, they'd gone too far this time, asterisk. The scene that greeted them was like something out of a nightmare. The once pristine facade of their home was now marred by jagged cracks in the windows, and the walls were defaced with crude, menacing slogans. Jill's hands trembled as she surveyed the damage, her eyes burning with unshed tears. Nathan pulled her into a tight embrace, his own expression grim. "We'll get through this, Jill, I promise." As the police officers took statements and collected evidence, Jill's gaze hardened. She knew without a doubt that the HOA was behind this, and she was more determined than ever to bring them down. That night, as Jill and Nathan pored over the evidence, a plan began to take shape. They would use the HOA's own tactics against them, turning the tables on the corrupt organization and exposing their lies and deceptions for all to see. "We need to go public with this," Jill said, her voice resolute. "The more people who know what the HOA is doing, the better." Nathan nodded, his eyes gleaming with determination. "I'll start reaching out to the local media. We need to get our story out there before the HOA can spin it to their advantage." As the days passed, Jill and Nathan's campaign began to gain traction. Local news outlets picked up the story, and soon the entire community was buzzing with outrage over the HOA's blatant abuse of power. Jill watched as the tide began to turn, a sense of cautious optimism stirring within her. But she knew that the battle was far from over. Karen and her cronies would not go down without a fight, and Jill braced herself for the inevitable retaliation. Asterisk, bring it on, Karen, asterisk, she thought, her gaze hardening. Asterisk, getting ready for you, asterisk. The public outcry over the HOA's actions had thrown the neighborhood into a state of chaos. Residents who had once been too afraid to speak out were now emboldened, taking to social media and local news outlets to share their own stories of harassment and intimidation. Jill and Nathan's strategy had worked, but they knew that the real battle was just beginning. Karen and the HOA were not the type to simply surrender, and they were sure to retaliate with everything they had. As the weeks passed, Jill found herself constantly on edge, her senses heightened to the slightest movement or sound. She knew that the HOA was watching, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And then it happened. One evening, as Jill was preparing dinner, the doorbell rang. Cautiously, she peered through the peephole, her heart sinking as she recognized the uniformed figure on the other side. It was a sheriff's deputy, his expression neutral. Jill took a deep breath and opened the door. "Can I help you, officer?" "Ma'am, I have a warrant for your arrest." The deputy's voice was calm, but his words sent a chill down Jill's spine. "Arrest? What on earth for?" she asked, her mind racing. "You're being charged with vandalism and property damage," the deputy replied, his eyes narrowing. "Apparently, there's evidence linking you to the recent incident at your home." Jill felt her stomach twist with a mixture of disbelief and rage. "That's absurd. I had nothing to do with that." The deputy shrugged, his expression apologetic. "I'm just following orders, ma'am. If you could please come with me, we can sort this out at the station." Jill's gaze flicked to Nathan, who had appeared at her side, his face etched with concern. She knew that this was no random occurrence. The HOA was behind this, and they were pulling out all the stops to silence her. With a resigned sigh, Jill stepped out onto the porch, her hands trembling as the deputy placed the handcuffs around her wrists. "I'll be in touch," she said to Nathan, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. As the deputy led her to the waiting patrol car, Jill could feel the eyes of her neighbors watching, their expressions ranging from shock to silent approval. She knew that the HOA had succeeded in turning the community against her, and the realization made her heart sink. Asterisk, but I won't give up. Asterisk, she thought, her jaw set with determination. Asterisk, not now, not ever, asterisk. At the police station, Jill was fingerprinted and booked, her spirit refusing to be broken even as she sat in the cold, sterile holding cell. She knew that this was all part of the HOA's game, a desperate attempt to silence her and regain control. But Jill was no stranger to the legal system, and she was determined to use it to her advantage. As the hours ticked by, she began to formulate a plan, her mind racing with possibilities. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the door to the cell swung open and a familiar face appeared. "Nathan," Jill exclaimed, relief flooding her features. Her husband strode into the cell, his expression grim. "I have posted bail, Jill. We need to get you out of here as soon as possible." Jill nodded, her heart racing. "What's the plan?" Nathan's lips curled into a determined smile. "We're going to fight this, Jill. We're going to expose the Homeowner's corruption and bring them down once and for all." As they hurried out of the police station, Jill felt a surge of renewed hope. The HOA may have thrown everything they had at her, but she was far from defeated. Asterisk, this is just the beginning. Asterisk, she thought, her eyes narrowing with resolve. Asterisk, and I'm not going down without a fight. Asterisk. The days that followed were a blur of activity as Jill and Nathan worked tirelessly to build their case against the HOA. They pored over every piece of evidence, meticulously documenting each and every transgression, from the vandalism at their home to the retaliatory arrest. With the support of a savvy team of lawyers, they filed a comprehensive lawsuit against the HOA, charging the organization with abuse of power, harassment, and corruption. It was a bold move, but Jill knew that they had no choice. The stakes were too high to back down. As the legal battle unfolded, the media frenzy surrounding the case only intensified. Reporters clamored for interviews, eager to expose the dark underbelly of the seemingly pristine neighborhood. Jill and Nathan seized the opportunity, using the platform to rally the community and shine a spotlight on the HOA's misdeeds. But Karen and her cronies were not about to go down without a fight. They pulled out all the stops, using their deep pockets and influential connections to mount a fierce counterattack. They hired their own team of lawyers who worked tirelessly to discredit Jill and Nathan's case, painting them as troublemakers and delusional conspiracy theorists. The courtroom was a battleground, with both sides trading blows and vying for the judge's favor. Jill felt the weight of the world on her shoulders, knowing that the future of her family and her community hung in the balance. And then, just when it seemed like all hope was lost, a crucial piece of evidence emerged, a flash drive containing the footage from the HOA's hidden security cameras. Nathan had managed to hack into the system and retrieve the damning footage, which showed Karen and her associates conspiring to frame Jill for the vandalism. The revelation was a bombshell, sending shockwaves through the courtroom. Jill watched with bated breath as the judge reviewed the footage, his expression hardening with each passing moment. In the end, the ruling was swift and decisive. The HOA was found guilty of abuse of power, harassment, and corruption and ordered to pay hefty fines and dismantle their entire security system. Karen and several other key members were even facing criminal charges. As the gavel came down, the courtroom erupted in thunderous applause, and Jill felt a weight lifted from her shoulders. She had done it. She had beaten the HOA at their own game, and she had emerged victorious. As she and Nathan left the courthouse, they were greeted by a sea of grateful neighbors, their faces alight with relief and pride. Jill felt a surge of emotion, realizing that her fight had not just been for her own family, but for the entire community. "Thank you, Jill," one woman said, her eyes shining with tears. "You've given us our neighborhood back." Jill smiled, her own eyes glistening. It was a team effort. We all fought for what was right. As they made their way home, Jill couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought them to this point. It had been a long and arduous battle, filled with twists and turns, but in the end, they had emerged victorious. Asterisk, we did it, Nathan. Asterisk, she thought, squeezing her husband's hand. Asterisk, we took down the HOA, and we did it together. Asterisk. As they stepped through the front door, Jill felt a sense of peace wash over her. The neighborhood was finally free from the oppressive grip of the HOA, and she knew that a new era of unity and community was about to begin. Asterisk, this is just the start. Asterisk, she thought, her eyes shining with determination. Asterisk, there's no telling what we can accomplish when we stand together. Asterisk. And with that, Jill turned her gaze towards the future, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead.